You know, there is something we all do when we hit a certain age. We become incredibly good at making excuses for our bodies. You wake up. Maybe your arm feels a little heavy while you are pouring your morning coffee. Or you stumble just a fraction of an inch on the porch step. And what do we say? Oh, I probably just slept funny. Or, well, I am just not 40 anymore. It is a very natural thing to do. Whether you are a man who has worked hard with his hands his whole life, or a woman who has always kept the house running like clockwork, we just brush it off. We do not want to make a fuss. We do not want anyone to worry. But sometimes, that perfectly normal urge to just brush it off is exactly how a quiet warning slips right past us. When it comes to something like a stroke, we have been trained by television to look for the dramatic, the sudden collapse, the big, loud emergency. But the truth is, the body rarely works like a movie scene. Most of the time, it whispers long before it shouts. Today, we are going to talk about those whispers. 10 incredibly quiet things that happen in the living room, in the kitchen, or while just reading the paper, that too many folks over 60 completely ignore, not because they are careless, but because these signs disguise themselves perfectly as everyday aging. Let us look at what your body might be trying to tell you, in its own quiet way. Let us start with something that happens often in the quiet of the morning. You are sitting in your favorite chair. The sun is coming through the blinds, and you pick up the morning paper. Or maybe you are looking at your phone to check a message from your kids. Suddenly, the text gets a little muddy, not the whole page, and you have not gone blind. Just a patch of it seems washed out. Or maybe you look up across the room, and the edge of the television or the doorway seems doubled. Just for a fleeting second, what is the immediate thought? It is almost always the same. I need to get my prescription checked, or my eyes are just really tired today. For a man who has spent decades driving trucks or reading fine print, or a woman who has spent years managing a household and reading recipes, fading eyesight is a familiar, fully accepted part of getting older. We expect our eyes to weaken, but there is a massive difference between eyes that are slowly aging over the years and a sudden, temporary shadow falling over your vision in a matter of seconds. Medical professionals sometimes refer to this as a transient visual change. For the person experiencing it, it can feel like a dimming, almost like a window shade being pulled down halfway over one eye, or a sudden burst of blurriness that clears up entirely after 3 or 4 minutes. Because it goes away so quickly, we let it go. We blink a few times. We rub our eyes. We take our glasses off and clean them on our shirt. And when the vision comes back sharp again, we consider the problem solved. We move on with our day. We do not realize that the temporary blur was not about the eyeball itself, but about the blood flow working behind it. It was the brain briefly asking for oxygen, not getting enough of it, and then recovering. That is not a sign to buy new reading glasses at the pharmacy. It is a sign to pay very close attention to your circulation. Now, think about your face. We know every line and every crease in the mirror by now. We know our own smiles. But sometimes, there is a sensation that simply does not belong there. You might be having your lunch, or maybe you are just talking to a friend on the telephone. Out of nowhere, you feel a strange tingling on one side of your cheek or right around your mouth. It feels almost exactly like when you go to the dentist and that numbing shot is just starting to wear off. That slight, dull, thick feeling. You might even touch your face with your hand, expecting the skin to feel different. But it feels completely normal to your fingers. It is only the inside that feels heavy. For a woman who is used to noticing every little detail about her appearance, she might look in the bathroom mirror and think her smile looks just a tiny fraction uneven. For a man, he might notice his morning coffee dribbles just a little bit on one side of his lip, or his tongue feels a little clumsy around certain words. And the excuse is instantly ready. I must have slept on my face wrong. Or, my allergies are acting up and making my sinuses feel numb. We are all so incredibly creative at giving innocent names to serious things. We want everything to be fine, so we convince ourselves it is. But a sudden, localized numbness on one side of the face, even if it is very mild, and even if it fades away completely by dinner time, is a classic whisper from your nervous system. It means a tiny vessel was struggling to push blood through. We ignore it because there is no pain involved. Over our lifetimes, we have been taught a simple rule. If something is really wrong, it is going to hurt. If it does not hurt, we think it is harmless. That is a deeply dangerous rule to live by when it comes to the complex plumbing of the human brain. Moving down from the face, let us talk about our hands. Our hands have done so much heavy lifting for us over 60 years. They have built things. They have cooked thousands of meals. They have held children and grandchildren. They have gripped steering wheels for countless miles. So when a hand suddenly betrays us, we are incredibly quick to forgive it. Imagine you are standing in the hallway, trying to button your shirt in the morning. Or you are holding your keys trying to unlock the front door after returning from the grocery store. Suddenly, your fingers just refuse to cooperate. You drop the keys on the mat, not because your hands were sweaty or they simply slipped, but because for a split second, your grip just vanished. Your hand felt like it belonged to someone else. It felt disconnected, clumsy, or unusually heavy. It is so easy to blame arthritis. Anyone over 60 with a bit of joint stiffness will instantly sigh and say, "Oh, my arthritis is really acting up today." Or we blame the cold weather chilling our bones. But arthritis is an ache in the joints. It is a stiffness that you usually wake up with and carry throughout the morning. What we are talking about here is a sudden, entirely painless loss of coordination or strength in one arm or one single hand. You might be reaching up to put away a heavy coffee mug in the cabinet, and your arm simply refuses to lift it those last 3 inches to the shelf. It feels like lead. You actually have to use your other hand to help lift your arm. And then, 10 minutes later, the strength is completely back. You test your grip. Everything works. And you think, well, that was strange. You go sit down, turn on the television, and you go on with your life. You do not tell your son or daughter because you do not want them hovering over you. You do not want them worrying that you cannot live on your own anymore. Maintaining independence is so fundamentally important to us as we get older. We cling to it, but ignoring a sudden, temporary weakness in one limb is not protecting your independence at all. It is actually risking it. That fleeting weakness is often a tiny clot that blocked a blood vessel just long enough to cause a malfunction, and then broke apart or passed through. It is what doctors call a warning shot fired across the bow. Let us add one more symptom to this part of our conversation before we move forward. The momentary loss of words. We all joke about having a senior moment. You walk into the kitchen and completely forget why you walked in there. You forget where you put your reading glasses when they are sitting on your head. That is normal. That is just a busy, tired brain doing what it does. But there is a very different kind of memory or speech lapse that people routinely ignore. You are sitting at the dinner table with your family or friends. The conversation is flowing naturally. Someone asks you a direct question. Something very simple, like, "What time is the plumber coming tomorrow?" You know the answer. The answer is right there in your head. But when you open your mouth, the wrong word entirely comes out. You might say Tuesday instead of 10 o'clock, and you realize it makes no sense. Or the words come out slurred, almost like your tongue is suddenly too thick for your mouth. Like you have had a few drinks when you have not touched a drop. Or perhaps worse, you cannot find the word at all. You just stare across the table for a few seconds, feeling suddenly very confused and disconnected from the conversation. The room might feel like it is spinning just a little, or maybe it is just a profound fog rolling into your mind. Your family might look at you and ask if you are okay, and you quickly recover. You wave your hand defensively and say, "Oh, I just lost my train of thought. I did not sleep well last night." Both men and women do this constantly. We mask our physical vulnerabilities with humor or quick excuses. We do not want to be a burden. And we certainly do not want people looking at us with that specific kind of pitying concern. But a sudden inability to articulate a simple thought, or a sudden, sharp difficulty in understanding what someone else is saying to you, is not a standard senior moment. It is a neurological event. Your brain is a miraculous machine, but it requires a constant, uninterrupted flow of fuel. When that flow is pinched, even for 20 seconds, the machine stumbles. If your car engine sputtered and stalled out on the highway, you would pull over immediately and call a mechanic. You would not just say the car is getting old and keep driving hoping for the best. Yet, we do exactly that with our own minds, hoping the problem will just fix itself if we do not talk about it. Let us shift our focus from the way we communicate to the way we move through our own homes. There is a certain pride we all carry in knowing every inch of our house. You know exactly how many steps it takes to get from the bed to the bathroom in the dark. You know which floorboard creaks in the hallway. You navigate your own space on autopilot. So, what happens when that familiar space suddenly feels entirely wrong? Imagine you are in the kitchen. You have been standing by the sink, perhaps washing a few dishes or looking out the window at the yard. You turn around to walk toward the refrigerator. Just a simple, everyday pivot. But as you turn, the floor suddenly feels like the deck of a boat in rough water. The room tilts. Your center of gravity completely vanishes, and you have to shoot your hand out to grab the edge of the granite counter just to keep from going down. If your husband or wife is sitting right there at the kitchen table and asks, with that slight edge of panic in their voice, "Honey, are you all right?" What is your immediate reaction? For a lot of folks, the reaction is actually mild irritation. We get defensive. We wave them off and say, "I am fine. I just stood up too fast." Or my blood pressure must have dropped. Or even, these slippers just do not have any grip left on the bottom. We blame gravity. We blame our shoes. We blame the simple act of standing up. And then, a minute later, the room stops spinning. Your footing feels solid again. And you go right back to what you were doing. Now, it is absolutely true that inner ear problems, or simply rising too quickly from a chair, can make you a little dizzy. That is a normal part of life. But there is a distinct difference between a mild wave of lightheadedness and a sudden, violent loss of balance that comes out of nowhere when you are already on your feet. When the world abruptly tilts without any provocation, it is often not an issue with your ears or your footwear. It is a quiet disruption in the part of your brain that acts as your internal gyroscope, the cerebellum. When the blood flow to that specific, the delicate area is compromised even for a moment. Your brain loses its map of where your body is in space. Brushing it off as just standing up too fast is incredibly common. But it is also a way we unintentionally silence a very important alarm bell. Let us look at another profoundly common situation. This one hides behind something every single person over 60 feels almost every day. Tiredness. We all know what it means to be tired. You spend the whole morning working in the flower beds, pulling weeds under the hot sun. Or maybe you spent 4 hours underneath a car in the garage fixing a brake line. By 3 in the afternoon, your muscles ache. Your joints are stiff, and you want nothing more than to sit in your favorite armchair. That is earned fatigue. That is the physical result of work. But there is a different kind of heaviness that sneaks up on people. And it does not wait for you to do any hard work. You could just be sitting on the porch or reading a book, feeling perfectly fine. Out of nowhere, it hits you. It is not just feeling sleepy. It is a sudden, crushing exhaustion. It feels like someone just draped a lead apron over your shoulders, the kind they put on you at the dentist's office when they take an X-ray. Your arms feel heavy. Your legs feel like they are rooted to the floor. And the simple idea of standing up to walk to the kitchen seems like climbing a mountain. What do we tell ourselves when this happens? We rationalize it perfectly. We think, well, I guess I did not sleep as well as I thought last night. Or maybe that heavy lunch I had is catching up with me. We might just close our eyes and take a nap, thinking rest is the natural cure. The problem is, this specific kind of profound, sudden onset heaviness, where the body just feels like it wants to power down entirely, is not always about a lack of sleep or a heavy meal. When a portion of the brain is suddenly starved of its normal blood supply, it goes into a mode of extreme energy conservation. The neurological system essentially dims the lights to protect itself. It sends a systemic signal of absolute exhaustion, trying to force you to stop moving so it can redirect whatever resources it has left. Many people who have experienced a significant medical event later recall that the day before, or the hours before, they felt an unexplainable, overwhelming urge to just lie down. Not because their muscles were tired, but because their entire system felt incredibly heavy. We are so used to powering through fatigue that we rarely pause to ask if this tiredness feels different than the usual kind. Next, I want to talk about something that happens at the dinner table. It is something so incredibly ordinary that it is almost impossible to think of it as a warning sign. You are having dinner. Maybe it is chicken. Maybe just a glass of water. You take a sip or a bite. You swallow. And suddenly, you are coughing. It catches in your throat. Your eyes start to water, and you have to clear your throat loudly a few times to get your breath back. Somebody at the table might chuckle and say, "Swallowed down the wrong pipe," and you nod, wiping a tear from your eye, and say, "Yes, went right down the wrong pipe." You take another small sip of water to clear it. Your voice sounds a little bit raspy or hoarse for a few minutes, and the meal continues. It happens to everyone, but here is where the detail matters. If you are noticing that you are suddenly clearing your throat a lot more during meals, or if that feeling of food getting stuck or liquid going down the wrong way happens out of the blue, unprovoked by talking or laughing while eating, it warrants a closer look. Swallowing is not just gravity doing its work. It is an incredibly complex, highly choreographed dance of dozens of tiny muscles in your throat, all perfectly timed and controlled by cranial nerves. It is an automatic sequence that your brain runs thousands of times a day without you ever having to think about it. But if the blood flow to the brainstem, the command center for these automatic functions, is briefly interrupted. The timing of that muscle dance gets thrown off by just a fraction of a second. The flap that protects your airway might close a millisecond too late. We write it off entirely because coughing during a meal is a universal human experience. But a sudden, uncharacteristic difficulty in swallowing, or a sudden, unexplained hoarseness in your voice that accompanies it, is your body's subtle way of showing you that the neurological timing is misfiring. It is a tiny, localized glitch in the system. And speaking of glitches, let us talk about the way we walk. As we get older, our relationship with our legs and joints becomes very complicated. We have all got a bad knee, a stiff hip, or a touch of sciatica that flares up when it rains. We are intimately familiar with our own orthopedic flaws. Imagine you are walking down the driveway to get the mail, or you are walking through the aisles of the grocery store. You are moving at your normal pace. Suddenly, for just a few steps, your foot does not lift quite as high as it should. The toe of your shoe catches the edge of the carpet or scrapes against the pavement. You stumble slightly. You catch your balance, and you keep walking. Instantly, the mental Rolodex of excuses starts spinning. Oh, my bad knee gave out for a second. Or my sciatica is pinching down my leg today. Or even, I just tripped over my own 2 feet. How clumsy of me. Because we are so used to our joints aching or our backs giving us trouble, we immediately blame the mechanics of the leg itself. We assume the hardware is at fault. But often, it is not the knee, and it is not the hip. It is the software. It is the motor cortex in the brain sending a signal down the spinal cord to tell the foot to lift. And for a split second, that signal gets lost or weakened. The leg feels heavy or disconnected, almost like dragging a dead weight for just a single step or two. This is sometimes referred to as foot drop, and when it happens briefly and resolves itself, it is incredibly easy to dismiss. We do not want to stop and think about the implications. Admitting that our leg didn't respond to our brain's command is terrifying. So we choose the much more comfortable, familiar lie. We blame the arthritis. We blame the old football injury from 40 years ago. We find comfort in the physical pain we know, rather than facing the painless neurological misfire we don't understand. These are the quiet moments, the momentary stumble, the brief dimming of the eyes, the sudden clumsiness of a hand, the misplaced word, the heavy exhaustion. None of these things usually come with sirens or flashing lights. They happen quietly, in the safety of our own homes, surrounded by the people we love. And because they often pass as quickly as they arrive, they leave us with a false sense of security. They leave us believing that our bodies simply had a minor hiccup, and that the danger, if there ever was any, has safely passed. That false sense of security brings us to something that almost every single person deals with at some point in their week, making it the perfect hiding place for a more serious warning. I am talking about headaches. By the time you reach 60, you know your own headaches intimately. If you are a woman who has dealt with migraines for decades, you know exactly what the aura feels like before it hits. If you are a man who gets tension headaches from squinting at a screen or driving into the sun, you know the familiar, dull band of pressure wrapping around your forehead. You know when to take an aspirin, and you know when you just need to sit in a dark, quiet room for an hour. But what happens when a headache arrives that simply does not fit your normal pattern? Imagine you are out on the back patio. It is a beautiful afternoon. Maybe you are just watching the grandkids play in the yard, or you are watering the potted plants. Out of nowhere, a sudden, sharp, entirely unfamiliar pain hits you. It does not build up slowly over the afternoon like your usual tension headaches do. It strikes almost instantly. It might be localized to one specific spot behind your eye, or it might feel like a sudden, intense pressure at the very base of your skull, right where your neck meets your head. Because we are creatures of habit, we immediately search our mental catalog for a logical, harmless explanation. You look up at the sky and think, the barometric pressure must be dropping rapidly. A storm is rolling in. Or you rub the back of your neck and tell yourself, I must have tweaked a muscle while pulling that weed. Or I probably have not drank enough water today. We find a reason that makes sense to us, and we take a pain reliever. When the pain eventually subsides an hour later, we feel validated. We think, see, just a weather headache. But there is a fundamental difference between a muscle tension ache and a sudden, violent shift in the vascular pressure inside your head. When an artery in the brain briefly spasms, or when a tiny clot temporarily restricts the flow and causes blood to back up, the pressure inside the vessel changes instantly. Your brain itself does not have pain receptors. You cannot actually feel your own brain tissue. But the blood vessels and the delicate lining surrounding the brain are packed with nerve endings. When those vessels are suddenly stretched or deprived of their normal flow, they scream. A sudden, severe headache that comes out of nowhere feels entirely different from your usual aches, and perhaps brings a fleeting wave of nausea with it. Is not the weather changing? It is your vascular system experiencing a sudden, dramatic fluctuation. Dismissing it as a sinus issue because it eventually went away is a profound gamble. Wart. Let us move to the 10th, and perhaps the most deeply hidden warning sign of all. It is hidden because it does not involve pain. It does not involve collapsing. And it does not even involve weakness. It involves a sudden, terrifying blank space in your own muscle memory. Think about a task you have done 10,000 times in your life. Something so routine you could do it in the pitch dark. For a man, it might be walking out to the garage, picking up a drill, and changing the bit. For a woman, It might be standing in the laundry room, sorting the clothes, and pouring the detergent into the washing machine. Or it could be as simple as making your morning pot of coffee. You walk into the kitchen. You reach for the coffee filter. You hold it in your hand. And suddenly, for a span of about 30 seconds, you have absolutely no idea what to do with it. You know it is a coffee filter. You know you want to make coffee. But the sequence, the familiar, automatic bridge between step A and step B has completely vanished. You stare at the coffee maker as if it is an alien piece of machinery. You might even hold the filter up, look at your spouse, and feel a sudden, intense flush of embarrassment or confusion. And then, just like a light switch flipping back on, the mental fog clears. You put the filter in the machine, scoop the grounds, pour the water, and start the pot. When this happens, the excuse we make is almost always tied to distraction. We laugh nervously and say, "Goodness, my mind was a million miles away." Or I was just thinking about what I need to buy at the grocery store. I completely blanked out. We call it a brain fart. We blame it on having too much on our plate. But there is a vast neurological difference between being distracted and experiencing a sudden inability to perform a highly familiar, sequential task. Medical professionals call this apraxia. It is not a memory problem in the traditional sense. You have not forgotten who you are or where you live. What has happened is that the specific network in your brain responsible for executive function and motor planning has experienced a temporary blackout. The part of the brain that translates your desire to make coffee into the physical, step-by-step actions required to do it was briefly starved of oxygen. This is incredibly frightening when it happens, but because it only lasts for a few moments, our instinct is to bury it. We do not tell anyone. We certainly do not call the doctor. To admit that we stood in front of our own coffee maker and forgot how to use it feels like admitting defeat. It feels like stepping over the line into being old, vulnerably, and dependent. So, we swallow our fear. We drink our coffee, and we pretend it never happened. We have talked about 10 different whispers today. 10 yet easily dismissed moments that happen in the ordinary rhythm of life. The blurry vision, the numb cheek, the clumsy hand, the lost word, the sudden dizziness, the heavy exhaustion, the slight choke at the dinner table, the stumbling foot, the unfamiliar pressure in the head, and the forgotten routine. When you look at them one by one, it is so incredibly easy to see why we ignore them. They mimic the normal, everyday aches and pains of simply living a long, full life. And more importantly, they usually go away. In the medical world, when these symptoms appear and then vanish completely within a few minutes or a few hours, it is called a transient ischemic attack, or a TIA. But out here in the real world, folks often call it a mini stroke. The problem with the word mini is that it makes it sound harmless. It makes it sound like a small, insignificant event that you do not need to worry about. But a TIA is not a minor event. It is a massive, flashing neon sign. When a tiny clot forms and temporarily blocks a blood vessel in your brain, it causes these symptoms. But then, by pure biological luck, your body manages to push it through or break it apart before any permanent tissue death occurs. The blood flow returns. The symptoms disappear. The crisis is averted. Many people view the disappearance of the symptoms as proof that they are fine. They think, well, whatever it was, my body handled it. I am good. But that is not how it works. The fleeting nature of these signs is not a reason to relax. It is the greatest gift your body could possibly give you. It is a grace period. Imagine you are driving your car down the highway, and the check engine light suddenly flashes bright red on the dashboard. The engine sputters, the car shakes, and you feel your stomach drop. But before you can even pull over to the shoulder of the road, the engine smooths out. The car runs perfectly again, and the red light turns off. Would you just keep driving for another 500 miles? Pretending it never happened? Of course not. You know that whatever caused that engine to sputter is still hiding under the hood. You know that the light turning off did not fix the problem. It just means the catastrophic failure hasn't happened yet. You would take it to a mechanic immediately because you want to keep driving that car for years to come. Your brain is the most precious engine you will ever own. When it stumbles, when it gives you a numb lip, a dropped key, or a sudden wave of dizziness and then recovers, it is not telling you that you are invincible. It is telling you that the conditions for a major stroke are already present in your plumbing. The clot was there. The narrowing of the artery is there. The risk is real. It just happened to clear this one time. There is a profound, silent epidemic of pride among people over 60. We have worked hard our whole lives to be the ones who take care of others. We are the providers, the protectors, the anchors of the family. The very last thing we ever want to be is a burden. We do not want to go to the emergency room, sit in a sterile gown, and have our children looking at us with worry in their eyes. All for a symptom that is completely gone by the time the doctor walks into the room. It feels foolish. It feels dramatic. But we have to completely change the way we look at this. Going to the doctor because you experienced a sudden, strange weakness in your arm that went away 5 minutes later is not being dramatic. It is the smartest, most proactive thing you can possibly do. It is how you stay the anchor of your family. It is how you protect your independence. The tragic reality is that a massive percentage of major, life-altering strokes are preceded by these quiet, temporary warnings days or weeks beforehand. People who end up losing their ability to walk or speak permanently often look back and realize, with devastating clarity, that their body tried to warn them. They remember the morning they dropped the coffee mug. They remember the afternoon the room spun around. They remember, but they chose to blame the arthritis, or the weather, or the shoes. You do not have to live in fear of every single ache and pain. Aging naturally brings stiffness, fatigue, and the occasional forgotten name. That is simply part of the human journey. But you do need to respect the sudden changes. You need to respect the painless, neurological glitches that come out of nowhere and disappear just as fast. If you recognize yourself in any of these stories, if you remember a moment from last week or last month where you stood in the kitchen and felt the world tilt, or where you lost the ability to speak clearly for 30 seconds, do not wait for it to happen again. Do not wait for the warning to become a permanent reality. Pick up the phone. Call your doctor. Tell them exactly what happened. Even if you feel perfectly fine right now, tell them you want to check your plumbing. Tell them you are listening to your body, because your body is not betraying you. It is not trying to fail you. In its own quiet, subtle way, it is desperately trying to keep you safe. It is giving you a second chance to protect the life you have built, the independence you cherish, and the years you still have ahead. All you have to do is be brave enough to listen to the whisper